bakery series, Britain's Best Bakes. Now today, I wanted to share a couple of recipes with you. One is a lovely enriched fruit bread that is inspired by a bakery where I live in the Lake District, Bryson's. They do they call it a Lakeland Plum Bread. And it's an enriched bread with butter, milk, vanilla, lemon, dried fruits. Absolutely delicious. I'm going to show you how to make that. And then I have got one of my most favorite recipes. It's an espresso fruit cake. So it's based on a Yorkshire tea bread. I've whipped the tea out and I've put espresso in, and then I've also put dates in instead of dried mixed fruit. Absolutely delicious. Perfect with a cappuccino. Right, let's bake. So we start off with 500 grams of strong bread flour. Now, strong meaning it's a higher in protein flour, which means when you're kneading it, you can turn the protein into gluten, which is what makes your dough stretchy, which is what holds it all together and makes it delicious. And then we have got 10 grams of dried yeast. Now, normally with a loaf of bread at 500 grams, you would put in 7 grams, which is a sachet. But because we're enriching it with an egg and some butter and milk, it's a slightly denser loaf, so it needs a bit more oomph and a bit more lift. So in with that, we've got salt, and then we have got our sugar. Now, if you want any of the recipes from this series, make sure all you need to do is just type free book in the comments below in this video. It will launch into Facebook Messenger. Follow the instructions and it will automatically deliver you a PDF cookery book of the series that Emily has spent loads of time making. A beautiful book, amazing images. It is there for you and it's free. So just type free book in. Right, okay, so got our dry ingredients in there. I'm also just going to add a pinch of cinnamon for a bit of depth of flavour. Do you like a plum bread, Emily? Do you do the plum bread? Or is that not a thing for you?
No, I wouldn't necessarily call it plum bread. Like fruit,
you are the Cumbrian in this room.
But fruited, like sweet bread, like what you make.
Does Bryson's not make it as far as Whitehaven? No?
I don't think so, actually. No?
There you go, Bryson's. You need to start delivering that way. Okay, so I have got some room temperature butter here. And then we're just going to use our fingertips and just rub the butter in. Now, when you add fat, i.e. butter, margarine, oil to a dough, it softens it, okay? So we're kind of leaning in towards brioche a bit here, but not that far. It's not as buttery as brioche, but it's got that little butteriness. Makes it nice and soft and rich. Lovely for toasting.
Does it make it last longer as well?
Yeah, it probably does, actually. Keeps it softer for longer.
Yeah.
So, you know, if you were just doing a normal white loaf and you wanted soft white loaf. So Thomas loves soft white bread, whereas I like really crusty bread. So if we're making some breads, we'll put a bit of butter, or rapeseed oil is really nice in there, and it kind of keeps it softer for longer. Good for bread rolls, you know, if you want like burger buns.
Yeah.
Put a bit of butter in your dough, that sort of thing. So, in with our butter, and then egg. This enriches the dough again. So you can enrich it with that. And then we're going to add our milk, 250 mils of milk. Now, that's what I've put in the recipe. It may be slightly different depending on the temperature. So in here, it's quite warm, the studio at the moment. So the flour will swell up a bit and it might absorb a little bit more liquid. It might not. If it's cold, it will tighten and won't absorb as much. Emily's got a big thick coat on, so she's saying it's cold. Me and Carlos are in t-shirts, so we think it's warm. But let's see what the dough says. So just run your hands around the bowl and you'll see the dough sort of pick up all the little bits and bobs. And once it becomes like a soft ball of dough, then, and only then, you transfer it onto the worktop. Okay? And this is where you've got to put a bit of work in. Now, you could easily just put this in a machine, you know, like one of these KitchenAids or whatever. you could put it in your bread maker and let it do the dough side of it if you wanted to. Okay, so, but in terms of simple bread, hold with one hand and push away with the other and pull it back. Don't be tempted to add any flour at this point, okay? You don't want to change the dynamics of the recipe. I promise you it works. And this worked exactly at 250 mils, which is good for the liquid. Now, if you wanted to make this plant-based or a vegan loaf, you could easily add a plant-based milk, plant-based butter, or you could use rapeseed oil instead and just lose the egg. It's absolutely fine. Okay, right. So a bit of kneading, stretching and working. And this is why we use bread flour, because we want to develop the gluten and we want the dough to become more stretchy, okay? And the only way to do that is to knead it, stretch it and develop the gluten. Okay? So I'm pulling it back and I'm stretching it. So just keep working the dough. Pull it back on yourself and almost go back on your heels of your feet and then go forward. What I tend to do is lean back, go forward, lean back, and it takes the sort of strain out a little bit. But as I said earlier, if you want to use your bread maker to make the dough, do that. If you want to use an electric mixer, do it. Whatever works for you, really. But I wanted to show you how to do it by hand so everybody can make it. And then if you want to use a bit of machinery, then that's your choice.
It looks like you'd want to add flour to it.
That's kind of exactly how you should feel when you're making a good bread dough. So what I'm trying to do is help you make a better bread, because I'm sure a lot of you have made bread out there before, and maybe it's not as good as you might have wanted it to be. And one of the key points is do not add more flour when you're kneading, because if you look at my hand there, I'm in a mess. And if you're at home like that, you'll be like, oh, I need to add some flour. I need to get this dough off my hands. Don't. Just keep working it. And the wetter it is, eventually it will come good without adding flour. Okay? And almost the wetter the better with dough. This dough, if you can cope with it like this, you'll end up with a better loaf of bread than if you start adding more flour, because it'll dry out. Okay? And all we now need to do at this point, so I've kneaded this for about 10 minutes. I'm going to take a dough scraper. These are like 50p on Amazon, or go to your local cook shop and ask them for a dough scraper. Get a flexible one like this, and you'll be able to just get all your dough off your hands, back onto your loaf, so you're not wasting it all and washing it down the sink. And then just simply, with the flat side, scrape all the bits of dough up like that, yeah? And just tidy up. So the flat side is for on your worktops, and then your curved side, which I'll show you in a minute, is for scooping around a bowl, okay? So all we need to do is grab our mixing bowl, use our dough scraper, and just pop it in there. I'm going to cover this with some cling film, and I'm going to leave it to double in size. I've got one that I've made earlier so that we can keep this going, but it will probably take an hour to double in size. And that will just allow all the yeast to produce the gas, prove the dough up, and then we'll knock it back and we'll flavour it. Right, so here is one I made earlier, and you can see this is exactly the same dough, exactly the same recipe. Can we have a look inside here, Emily?
Yeah.
So if I just lift the dough like that, do you see how stretchy it is now? Yeah. And then if I take my dough scraper and the curved edge, bend it like that, I should be able to just scoop this out in one piece. If I'm lucky. There you go. And that's why we use these. They're like 50p. They're not expensive, maybe £1 now. But they're worth it. They're really, really good pieces of kit. And nothing else really does the job, unless you can make one. Okay, so this is full of gas still. So what we've got to do is get rid of the gas, degas it, stretch it out, like so. And what I can show you here is, can you see the dough structure there?
Yeah.
That means the development of the gluten is there. I mean, look how stretchy that is now. That's what we want. A really good stretchy dough that's going to hold everything inside. Okay, so got my dried fruit. This is mixed, so it's raisins, sultanas, currants, mixed peel. I'm also going to add a bit of lemon zest in as well, just for a bit of fragrance. This isn't traditional by any means, but I just think the fragrance works really well. You could add orange if you want, or lime, or grapefruit. That would work well for a bit of Florida grapefruit. Maybe you ought to try that.
Yeah.
Every year we do some recipe development for Florida grapefruit, so it's getting towards that time of year, isn't it, where we start thinking, what can we develop using that amazing fruit? So just take the yellow off, leave the white. I always tend to use one of these sort of microplane graters. It's more of a plane than a grater. And then just spread that out. So we've got a little bit of cinnamon, a little bit of lemon, we've got dried fruit. All those flavors are going to work really well together. Fold the dough to encase the fruit, okay? And just fold.
And still no flour.
No flour yet. We're going to add a touch in a minute, but we've already got a really good dough. So all we're going to do is stretch out, pull back, and all I'm doing is distributing the fruit now throughout the dough. So if you were in a mixer, you could just chuck it all in and keep going. Just keep kneading, but please do me a favor. Do not add any flour unless you absolutely need to. If you can get away with no flour, you'll get a better bread. So I'm just using my dough scraper now just to bring everything together. Still not adding flour, just shaping and working. And what we're going to try and do is get a nice strong crown on the bread, okay? And what I mean by that is no creases. All right, so if you can see, I've got my dough. I don't want any creases on it. I want it to nice and evenly prove. So I've now turned it the other way. And I'm just trying to tighten the top. Now, can we have a look at this dough, Emily, close up?
Yeah.
You see all these little bits of fruit here? If I leave those and put that in the oven, they're going to burn because they're already dried fruit. So they're already going to burn because they're dry and there's no hydration. So just take your time and remove them. We're not going to waste them. We're going to tuck them back into the bread. But if you leave them on top, they'll go black and they'll be bitter. And you'll ruin that lovely, sweet, rich bread that you've produced. You see any more?
One on the left-hand side.
One there.
And some on the front.
Yeah, that's not too bad. That's okay. It's most important on the top. Okay? So what I'll do is we're going to get a loaf tin. Okay, this is a 2-pound loaf tin. And then we will just simply, I'm going to put a little bit of flour on the bottom, tiniest of amounts. But this is a non-stick pan, so it won't stick. And then you just pop it in, okay? We're going to leave this to prove for 40 to 45 minutes, I think. It's quite warm in here now, isn't it, Emily?
Yeah.
We'll see, the dough will never lie. It will prove and double in size, and then you want to bake it in a preheated oven. Now, if you want the temperature off the top of my head, I think it's 180, maybe 190. But if you type free book in the comments, you'll get the recipe in Facebook Messenger, and then you'll be able to definitely check whether I'm right or not. So type free book in the recipe. Right, I'm going to leave this to prove. I've got one I've already made, so I'm going to clear down and we'll have a little look. Right, my loaf is baked. Here's one I baked earlier. It's cooled down and you can see it's beautiful and golden. And you see how we removed all the raisins and bits of dried fruit at the top. Got a nice, even golden crumb. I actually brushed this with a little bit of beaten egg before it went into the oven, so you get that extra nice little bit of shine. Perfect for breakfast, or even maybe, you know, a bit of 11sies or something like that, or an afternoon tea slice. So let's just slice some up. There we go, look at that. So we'll have a little taste. So it's nice, it's fresh, it's light and fluffy. All it needs is a tiny bit of butter. There you go, Emily. Look at that. Proper wedge of butter on there. And I must say, I do like a little bit of raspberry jam on mine. So here you go, Emily. I'll cut this in half. We'll have a little taste. Now, while we're having a taste of this, you watch how we make the most amazing espresso fruit cake.
Espresso fruit cake. I absolutely love this recipe. It was one of the first ones I ever wrote. First of all, get some scissors and chop your dates up and soak them in the coffee. Give them a good stir around, let them get soft. Then you want your flour, your butter into a mixing bowl. Get your fingertips in and rub the two together until you have a crumble type texture. Add the soft brown sugar, mix that in as well so it's nice and evenly distributed. In with a free-range egg, in with your eggs, mix together with the milk, and then pour it into the dry mixture. Take your soaked dates and put them into the bowl with some walnuts and mix together until you have a cake batter. Once everything's fully incorporated, transfer it into a 2-pound loaf tin lined with some parchment paper and then into the oven. It's a low, slow bake, but it makes the best coffee cake. It's a low and slow bake, but it makes the most delicious, rich coffee fruit cake, topped with butter and an amazing cup of coffee. What more do you want?
There you go. That is how you make my espresso fruit cake. Absolutely love that recipe. It was one of the first ones I ever wrote for my first cookbook, Simply Good Taste, 13 or 14 years ago. So it stood the test of time. I'm still baking it today. Now, thank you very much for watching, and I will see you on the next episode.